The massive ship moved through space like a moving mountain. Its dark metal hull was covered in sharp spikes and thick armor plates. Inside the ship, Commander Zactar stood 12 feet tall. His body was like a living tank, covered in natural armor that could stop bullets. His forearms ended in claws that could tear through steel. His yellow eyes glowed in the dim light of the bridge. The Corvani had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every planet they found, they took. Species they met, they conquered. It was always the same story. The aliens would see the Corvani ships and surrender immediately. Those who tried to fight lasted only a few hours before giving up. "Commander," said his second officer Vorak, "we have found another world with intelligent life." Zactar looked at the blue planet on the screen. It looked peaceful and quiet. The sun was yellow and warm. There were white clouds and green countenance. It reminded him of the garden worlds the Corvani kept for growing food. "What do the scans show?" Zactar asked. "The inhabitants call themselves humans," Vorak replied. "They are very weak, Commander. Thin skin, soft bones, no natural weapons. They will surrender in minutes." Zactar nodded. This would be easy. Had conquered 47 worlds, and this would be number 48. The Corvani Empire would grow larger, and these humans would become workers in their factories and farms. "How many ships do they have?" Zactar asked. "About 200 small." "Vessels," Vorak said. "Primitive weapons. No energy shields. Their technology is at least 500 years behind ours." Zactar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Send the message. Tell them to surrender now, and we will not destroy their cities." On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command center. Of the Earth Defense Force, he was 35 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had been a soldier for 15 years, fighting in wars across different countries. But nothing had prepared him for this. The message from the alien ships was clear. Surrender or be destroyed. Jake looked at the screen, showing the huge ships hanging in Earth's sky. Each one was the size of a city. Their weapons could probably destroy entire continents. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Davis, a young woman with red hair and green eyes. "What are your orders?" Jake thought about his family. His wife Sarah was a doctor in the city below. His daughter Emma was only 8 years old. If they fought these aliens, many people would die. But if they surrendered, what would happen to humanity? "Send our reply," Jake said quietly. The message went back to the Corvani fleet. It was short and simple. "Go to hell," Zactar stared at the screen. In 3,000 years, no species had ever refused to surrender. They all begged for mercy. They all offered to become slaves to save their lives. But these humans were different, Commander Vorak said with confusion. "Perhaps they do not understand." "Should we send the message again?" "No," Zactar said slowly. "They understand. Begin the attack." The Corvani ships moved toward Earth like falling stars. Their weapons charged up, ready to destroy the human fleet. Zactar expected this to last maybe an hour. Then the humans would see their ships burning and finally surrender. Jake Morrison watched the alien ships approach. His small fleet was spread out around Earth's moon. Each human ship was tiny compared to the alien vessels. But Jake had a plan. "All ships," he said into his radio. "Remember what we practiced? Hit and run. Don't try to fight them head on. Use the asteroids for cover. Make them work for every shot." Lieutenant Amy Davis was pilot of the fighter ship Eagle 7. She had flown combat missions in 3 different wars. But this was different. She was not just fighting for her country now. She was fighting for her entire species, the first Corvani. Ship fired its main weapon. A beam of red energy shot through space and destroyed a human destroyer in one hit. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. "Eagle Squadron," Amy said to her team, "follow me. We go in fast and low." Amy's fighter dove toward the Corvani ship like a tiny bird attacking a giant. The alien ship's guns tried to track her, but she was too fast and too small. She flew between the ship's armor plates and fired her missiles at close range. The explosions barely scratched the Corvani armor, but they made the ship shake. More human fighters followed Amy's lead. They swarmed around the alien ships like angry bees. On the Corvani flagship, alarms were ringing. Zactar watched his screens with growing confusion. The human ships were not fighting the way other species fought. Instead of staying in formation and trading shots, they were everywhere at once. "Report," Zactar demanded. "The humans are using unconventional tactics," Vorak said. "They're attacking from multiple directions. They hide behind asteroids and space debris. They work in small groups." "Are we winning?" Zactar asked. Vorak hesitated. "We have destroyed 15 human ships, but we have lost 2 of our own vessels. Their fighters are causing significant damage to our weapon systems." Zactar could not believe what he was hearing. These weak, soft creatures were actually hurting his fleet. It should have been impossible. The battle raged for 6 hours. The human ships fought like they had nothing to lose. Every time a Corvani ship destroyed one human vessel, 2 more would appear from different directions. They used the planet's moon as a shield. They hid in the asteroid belt and ambushed alien patrols. Captain Jake Morrison coordinated the battle from his command ship. He had lost 40 ships and 300 people. But the aliens had lost 5 ships and thousands of their warriors. For the first time in galactic history, the Corvani were not winning easily. Lieutenant Amy Davis was still alive, though her fighter was badly damaged. She had shot down 2 Corvani shuttles and damaged a cruiser. Her radio crackled with messages from other pilots. "Eagle 7, this is Eagle 2. I'm hit bad and going down." "Eagle 2, this is Eagle 7. I see you. Try to reach the moon base." "Negative, Eagle 7. My engines are gone. Tell my wife I love her." Amy watched Eagle 2's ship crash into an asteroid. But she kept fighting because that was what humans did. They never gave up. As night fell on the battlefield, both fleets pulled back to assess their losses. Zactar stood in his command room, staring at the damage reports. "This was not how things were supposed to go," Commander Vorak said carefully. "Perhaps we should call for reinforcements." The words hit Zactar like a physical blow. The Corvani had never needed reinforcements. They were the strongest species. In the galaxy, their natural armor could stop any weapon. Their strength could crush any enemy. But these humans had fought them to a standstill. Zactar looked at the blue planet on his screen. Somewhere down there, the humans were probably planning their next attack. They had lost many ships and many people, but they were not surrendering. They were getting ready to fight again tomorrow, for the first time in his life. Commander Zactar felt something he had never experienced before. He felt doubt. These small, weak creatures had done something that no other species had managed to do in 3,000 years. They had made the Corvani bleed. The war was just beginning. And already everything Zactar believed about strength and power was starting to crack like old armor under pressure. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle, and the war was not going as Zactar had planned. The humans continued to fight with a stubbornness that defied all logic. Every day brought new surprises and new tactics that the Corvani had never seen before. Dr. Lisa Park ran through the burning streets of New York City as Corvani. Ground forces marched through the downtown area. She was a scientist, not a soldier, but the war had changed everyone's life. Lisa studied alien biology at Columbia University, and now she was about to become the subject of alien study herself, a Corvani warrior, 8 feet tall and covered in thick armor, grabbed Lisa with one of his 4 massive arms. She struggled but could not break free. The alien's grip was like being held by a machine made of steel and bone. "This one appears to be a scientist," the warrior said in his deep, rumbling voice. "Commander Zactar wants to examine human scholars." Lisa was dragged to a Corvani transport ship and flown up to the massive flagship hanging in Earth's orbit. She had seen pictures of Corvani ships, but being inside one was different. Everything was built for creatures much larger and stronger than humans. The corridors were wide enough for tanks to drive through, the ceiling was 20 feet high. Even the door handles were too big for human hands. They brought Lisa to a room that looked like a laboratory. The walls were covered with strange equipment and screens, showing data she could not read. In the center of the room stood Commander Zactar himself. Lisa had seen images of Corvani before, but meeting one in person was terrifying. Zactar was 12 feet tall and looked like he could tear apart a car with his bare hands. His yellow, eyes studied her like she was an interesting insect. "You're Dr. Lisa Park," Zactar said. His voice was so deep it made the floor vibrate. "You study alien life forms?" "Yes," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Though I never expected to meet any quite like this." Zactar tilted his massive head. "You do not seem afraid." "I am terrified," Lisa replied honestly. "But fear does not help anyone." "What do you want from me?" For the next several hours, Zactar questioned Lisa about human biology, culture, and behavior. He wanted to understand how such weak creatures could fight so effectively against his superior forces. Lisa answered his questions as best she could, partly because she was curious about the Corvani herself, and partly because she hoped her cooperation might help her survive. "Explain to me," Zactar said, "why your people continue to fight when defeat is certain. Every scan shows that humans are physically inferior. Your bones break easily. Your skin provides no protection. You have no natural weapons. Yet you refuse to surrender." Lisa thought carefully before answering. "We fight because giving up means the end of everything we care about. Our families, our freedom, our way of life. We would rather die fighting than live as slaves." "This makes no logical sense," Zactar said with frustration. "Death is permanent. Slavery at least allows survival." "But what kind of survival?" Lisa asked. "If we cannot choose our own path, if we cannot protect our children, if we cannot be free, then we are already dead in the ways that matter most." Well, Lisa was being questioned aboard the Corvani flagship. Colonel Ryan Clark was organizing resistance operations in the mountains of Colorado. Ryan was a tough man in his 40s with gray hair and scars from previous wars. He had served in special forces for 20 years before the aliens arrived. The Corvani controlled most of Earth's major cities, but they were having trouble with the countryside. Human resistance fighters used guerrilla tactics that the aliens could not understand. They struck fast and disappeared into terrain that the Corvani found dangerous and unfamiliar. "Listen up," Ryan told his team of 30 volunteers. "The aliens are sending a supply convoy through Devil's Canyon tomorrow morning. Their vehicles are armored, but they have to slow down on the mountain roads." Private Matt Johnson, a young man who had been a mechanic before the war, raised his hand. "Colonel, their armor is supposed to be unbreakable. How do we hurt them?" Ryan smiled grimly. "Their armor protects them from energy weapons and explosives, but it does not protect them from the planet itself." The next morning, the Corvani convoy moved slowly through the narrow mountain pass. The vehicles were massive and heavily armed, but the road was treacherous. On both sides were steep cliffs and loose rocks. Colonel Ryan and his team had spent all night preparing, had not tried to build bombs or weapons that could penetrate Corvani armor. Instead, they had weakened the road itself. When the first Corvani vehicle reached the center of the pass, Ryan triggered the landslide they had prepared. Tons of rock and earth came crashing down from above. The alien vehicles were buried under an avalanche that no armor could protect against. The surviving Corvani soldiers climbed out of their damaged vehicles, but they found themselves trapped in a canyon with no way out. Human fighters appeared on the cliffs above, using the high ground and narrow spaces to their advantage. The battle was short but decisive. The Corvani were used to fighting in open spaces where their superior strength and weapons gave them the advantage. In the narrow canyon, surrounded by enemies they could barely see, their advantages meant nothing. Back on the flagship, Zactar received reports of the ambush with growing confusion. This was the 15th convoy that had been destroyed. In 2 weeks, his forces controlled the cities, but they could not secure the supply lines needed to maintain their occupation. Dr. Park Zactar said, "Explain this tactical behavior. Your Colonel Clark used the terrain against us. This is not how civilized warfare is conducted." Lisa looked at him with surprise. "Civilized warfare? You invaded our planet without warning. You tried to conquer us. We are fighting for our survival using every advantage we can find." "But there are rules," Zactar insisted. "Proper formations, honorable combat, equal terms." "Those are your rules," Lisa said. "We never agreed to them. Why should we fight the way you want us to fight? That would only make it easier for you to win." Zactar was quiet for a long moment. In all his years of conquest, Enemy species had always tried to match the Corvani in direct combat. They built bigger weapons and stronger armor. They formed their armies in traditional patterns. They fought the Corvani way, and they always lost. But humans were different. They did not try to be stronger than the Corvani. Instead, they found ways to make strength irrelevant. They fought in places where armor was useless. They used tactics that turned Corvani advantages into disadvantages. "Tell me about your planet," Zactar said suddenly. Lisa was surprised by the change of subject. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The environment, the dangers, how humans survived." Lisa spent the next hour describing Earth's hostile environment. She told Zactar about hurricanes that could destroy entire cities, earthquakes that could split the ground open, volcanoes that could bury whole regions in ash. She described the deep oceans where humans dove without breathing apparatus, the frozen poles where they somehow survived, the scorching deserts where they built entire civilizations. Humans evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them, Lisa explained. "We learned to adapt because we had no choice. We learned to survive in places that would kill most other species." Zactar listened with growing amazement. Corvani homeworld of Corvus's Prime was dangerous, but it was dangerous in predictable ways. There were strong predators and harsh gravity, but the environment was stable. Humans had evolved on a world that changed constantly and threatened them in hundreds of different ways. "Your species survived by being flexible," Zactar said slowly. "You adapted to each new threat." "Yes," Lisa said. "And now you are just another threat to adapt to." That night, Zactar stood alone in his command chamber, looking down at the blue planet below. For the first time since the war began, he was starting to understand what he was really fighting. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were survivors from a world that had taught them never to give up, never to accept defeat, and never to fight fair when their lives were at stake. The strongest species in the galaxy was beginning to learn that there were different kinds of strength, and some of them could not be measured by the thickness of armor or the power of weapons. Commander Zactar could not sleep. For 6 months, the war with humanity had continued, and nothing was going according to plan. The Corvani Empire had never fought a war that lasted more than a few weeks. Usually, enemy planets surrendered after seeing the first demonstration of Corvani power. But Earth was different. Zactar walked through the corridors of his flagship, past the medical bay where wounded Corvani warriors lay, recovering from injuries no one thought were possible. These soldiers had fought on dozens of worlds, crushing every enemy they encountered. Now they were being beaten by creatures they could break with their bare hands, in his private quarters. Zactar had been studying human culture through the data they had captured from Earth's computers. He read about human wars, their art, their literature, and their philosophy. What he discovered troubled him more than any military defeat. Dr. Lisa Park had been his prisoner for 2 months now, but their daily conversations had become less like interrogations and more like discussions between scholars. Today, she had brought something new to show him. This is a book of human history, Lisa said, holding up a thick volume. It tells the story of my species over the last 5,000 years. Zactar took the book carefully in his massive hands. The pages were thin and delicate, but the information they contained was devastating. He read about the Black Death, a plague that killed 1/3 of Europe but did not destroy human civilization. He learned about world wars that killed millions, but only made the survivors more determined to rebuild. "Your species has faced extinction many times," Zactar observed. "Yes," Lisa said. "Natural disasters, diseases, wars, famines. Each time, some of us survived and started over. That is what humans do. We endure." Zactar continued reading. He'd found stories that made no sense to his warrior mind. Humans who jumped on grenades to save their friends, soldiers who held impossible positions against overwhelming odds, ordinary people who risked everything to help strangers. "Explain this," Zactar said, pointing to a passage about the siege of Stalingrad. "Your people fought in a city that was being destroyed around them. They had no food, no supplies, no hope of victory. Why did they not surrender?" Lisa looked at the passage he was reading. because surrendering meant something worse than death. It meant their families would be enslaved, their culture would be erased, their children would grow up in a world without freedom. But many of them died, Zactar said. Yes, but their sacrifice meant that others could live free. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose, no matter what it costs. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Susan Turner was planning the most dangerous mission of her military career. Susan was 32 years old, with short blonde hair and ice-blue eyes. She had been a pilot before the war, flying rescue helicopters in dangerous weather conditions. Now she led a special operations team that specialized in impossible missions. The Corvani had built a massive supply depot in the ruins of Chicago. It was protected by energy shields and guarded by a full battalion of their best warriors. Depot contained weapons, fuel, and food for the alien occupation forces. Destroying it would cripple Corvani operations in North America. The shields have one weakness. Susan explained to her team of 12 volunteers. During the daily maintenance cycle, there is a 30-second window when the north section goes down for system checks. Sergeant Ben Cooper, a demolitions expert, studied the aerial photos of the depot. 30 seconds is not much time, Captain. We would have to get through 2 miles of hostile territory to reach the target. That is why we are not going through their territory, Susan said, with a smile. We are going under it. Chicago's old subway tunnels ran directly beneath the Corvani depot. The aliens had sealed most of the entrances, but they had not thought to guard the abandoned underground passages. Humans had been using tunnels for warfare for thousands of years, but this concept was foreign to the Corvani. The mission began at midnight. Susan's team entered the tunnel system through a hidden entrance 5 miles away from the depot.
Ow.
They crawled through passages filled with debris and contaminated water. Several times they had to dig through collapsed sections using nothing but their hands and small tools. Captain, whispered Private Dan Miller, the team's communications specialist. Motion sensors are picking up Corvani patrols directly above us. Susan checked her watch. They had been underground for 4 hours and were still 200 yards from their target. The shield maintenance cycle would begin in 30 minutes, and they needed to be in position. We keep moving, Susan said quietly. Stay low and stay quiet. The team reached the depot's foundation, just as the maintenance cycle began. Susan and Ben Cooper climbed up through a drainage grate and found themselves inside the shielded perimeter. Around them, massive Corvani vehicles and supply containers stretched as far as they could see. 20 seconds, Ben whispered as he placed the explosive charges on the main fuel depot. Corvani guards were everywhere, but they were looking outward for threats from the surface. They never imagined that humans would attack from below, through passages too small for Corvani bodies to fit through. 10 seconds, Susan said into her radio. The explosives detonated just as the shield came back online. The fuel depot exploded. In a massive fireball that lit up the night sky, secondary explosions followed as the fire spread to ammunition storage areas. Within minutes, the entire depot was destroyed. Susan and her team escaped through the tunnels as Corvani forces searched frantically for an enemy they could not find. The humans had struck again, using tactics that the aliens could not understand or counter. On the flagship, Zactar watched the reports of the depot's destruction with a mixture of anger and admiration. Captain Turner had accomplished with 12 humans what should have required an army. Her tactics were unconventional, clever, and completely successful. How did they penetrate our defenses? Demanded Vorak, Zactar's second in command. They used the old tunnel system, reported the intelligence officer. The passages are too small for our warriors to follow. Zactar was quiet for a long moment. The humans had turned their physical weakness into an advantage. They could go places that the larger, stronger Corvani could not reach. From positions that made Corvani's strength useless, Commander Vorak said carefully, perhaps it is time to request reinforcements from the home fleet. The words hit Zactar like a physical blow. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Corvani had never needed reinforcements. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. Their strength was legendary. But these small, weak humans had fought them to a standstill. Dr. Park Zactar said when he met with his prisoner that evening. What is the human word for refusing to accept defeat, even when victory is impossible? Lisa thought for a moment. Stubbornness, I suppose. Or determination. We also use the word hope. Hope, Zactar repeated slowly. Your people have hope even when facing certain death. Yes, Lisa said. Hope that our sacrifice will matter. Hope that others will continue the fight. Hope that freedom will survive even if we do not. Zactar looked out at the stars through the portal in his quarters. Somewhere out there, the Corvani Empire ruled over hundreds of worlds and billions of subjects. But for the first time in his life, he wondered if ruling through fear and strength was the only way to build a civilization. On Corvus Prime, Zactar said slowly, we teach our young that strength is everything. The strong survive and the weak perish. It is the natural order. But what if there are different kinds of strength? Lisa asked. What if the ability to adapt, to hope, to sacrifice for others is just as important as physical power? Zactar had no answer for that question. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed about the universe, was being challenged by these fragile creatures who refused to admit defeat. The strongest warrior in the galaxy was beginning to doubt whether strength alone was enough. That night, for the first time since the war began, Commander Zactar found himself wondering if the humans might actually be right. 8 months after the war began, something extraordinary happened. Ambassador Karen White stood in the ruins of the United Nations building in New York. Speaking on a secure radio channel with representatives from around the world, Karen was 50 years old with silver hair and calm gray eyes. She had spent her career negotiating peace treaties between warring nations, but she had never faced anything like this. Commander Zactar has requested a prisoner exchange, Karen announced to the Emergency Council. He wants to trade Dr. Lisa Park for 3 of our captured pilots. General Robert Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, frowned at the proposal. Could be a trap. Why would they suddenly care about prisoner exchanges? They have never shown mercy before. Maybe something has changed, suggested President Williams, joining the call from the emergency bunker in Colorado. Our intelligence reports say the Corvani forces have been acting differently lately. Less aggressive, more defensive. Karen had been studying reports about the alien behavior for weeks. The Corvani still controlled most major cities, but they had stopped trying to expand their territory. Our attacks had become less frequent and more careful. Something was definitely changing. The prisoner exchange took place on neutral ground at the abandoned Philadelphia airport. Karen arrived with a small diplomatic team, while Zactar came with only 2 guards. It was the first time humans and Corvani had met for any purpose other than battle. Karen was shocked by Zactar's size when she saw him in person. The Corvani commander towered over her like a walking tank. His yellow eyes could have belonged to a predator from humanity's worst nightmares. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than threatening. Ambassador White, Zactar said formally. I returned Dr. Park unharmed as promised. Lisa looked tired but healthy as she walked across the empty space between the 2 groups. Behind her came the 3 human pilots, including Captain Steve Martinez, who had been missing for 6 weeks. Thank you, Commander, Karen said carefully. May I ask why you agreed to this exchange? Zactar was quiet for a moment. Dr. Park has taught me much about human nature. I believe it is time for both our species to learn different ways of resolving conflicts. The words sent shockwaves through both the human and Corvani forces. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no Corvani commander had ever spoken of resolving conflicts through anything other than force. 3 days later, the most shocking military victory of the war took place. Sergeant Mike Kelly led a squad of 20 soldiers in an assault on Fort Davidson, a Corvani fortress built in the mountains of Montana. The fortress was supposed to be impregnable, defended by 200 elite Corvani warriors and advanced energy weapons. Mike was a small man with quick reflexes and a mind that worked like a chess master. He had been a police detective before the war, used to solving problems that seemed impossible. Now he was about to prove that human intelligence could overcome any defense. The fortress has one weakness, Mike explained to his squad as they studied the target from a hidden position. was built by engineers who think like Corvani. They expect attacks to come from obvious directions using predictable methods. Private Carol Thompson, a young woman who had been a rock climber before joining the army, looked at the fortress walls through binoculars. "Those walls are 40 feet high and smooth as glass. How do we get inside?" Mike smiled. "We do not climb the walls. We do not attack the gates. We do something they will never expect." Corvani had built their fortress to defend against conventional attacks. The walls were thick enough to stop tank shells. The gates were protected by energy shields. Guard towers provided overlapping fields of fire across all approaches. It was a perfect example of Corvani military engineering. But Mike had noticed something the alien engineers had missed. The fortress was built on top of an old human military base from World War II. The original bunkers and tunnels were still there. Buried beneath 50 years of dirt and vegetation, Mike's squad spent 2 days digging carefully through the old tunnel system. They worked in shifts, using hand tools to avoid making noise that might alert the Corvani sensors. The tunnels were cramped and dangerous, filled with rusty metal and unstable sections, but they led directly under the fortress. "Remember," Mike whispered to his team as they prepared for the final assault. "Speed and surprise are our only advantages. Once we are inside, we have maybe 10 minutes before they organize a response." The attack began at dawn. Mike's squad emerged from the tunnels inside the fortress courtyard, appearing like ghosts in the middle of what the Corvani thought was their most secure position. The aliens were completely unprepared for an attack from below. Private Carol Thompson and her partner Tony Rodriguez moved quickly to disable the main power generator. Without power, the fortress's advanced weapons and communication systems would be useless. Meanwhile, Mike led the rest of his squad to capture the command center. The battle inside the fortress was brutal but brief. The Corvani warriors were strong and well-armed, but they were fighting in enclosed spaces that favored human mobility and teamwork. Mike's squad used flash grenades, smoke bombs, and coordinated attacks to confuse and overwhelm their larger opponents. "Fortress secure," Mike reported over the radio 40 minutes after the attack began. 200 Corvani prisoners, minimal casualties on our side. The victory sent shockwaves through both armies. A single squad of humans had captured a fortress that should have required an entire division to assault. They had done it using tactics that turned every Corvani advantage into a disadvantage. On the flagship, Zactars studied the reports of the fortress battle with a mixture of admiration and despair. Sergeant Kelly had accomplished something that military experts would have called impossible. His victory was not just a tactical success. It was a complete demonstration of human superiority and adaptive thinking. Commander Vorak said nervously, "The garrison commanders are requesting permission to retreat to more defensible positions." Zactar looked at his second-in-command with tired eyes. "What positions would be defensible against an enemy that attacks from underground?" "From above, from directions we never think to guard, sir. The humans do not fight the way we expect them to fight. They do not attack where we are strong. Find our weaknesses and exploit them with tactics we cannot predict or counter." That evening, Zactar made a decision that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the war. He sent a message to the human leadership requesting formal peace negotiations. Ambassador Karen White received the message with surprise and hope. After 8 months of devastating warfare, the Corvani were finally ready to talk. Knew this was the most dangerous moment of the entire conflict. Peace negotiations could easily turn into a trap. "We agree to talks," Karen responded. "But they must be conducted as meetings between equals, not between conqueror and conquered." Zactar's reply came within hours. "Agreed, the humans have proven they are worthy opponents. Perhaps it is time we learn to be allies instead of enemies." The first peace talks took place on a neutral space station in Earth's orbit. Karen arrived with a small diplomatic team, while Zactar brought his senior officers. For the first time since the war began, humans and Corvani sat at the same table to discuss the future. "Why are you willing to negotiate now?" Karen asked. Directly, Zactar was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Because this war has taught me that strength comes in many forms. Physical power is only one kind of strength. Your people have shown me the power of determination, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat. And what do you want from these negotiations? To learn, Zactar said simply. For 3,000 years, the Corvani have believed that conquest was the only way to build an empire. But watching your people fight has made me wonder if there might be better ways to achieve greatness. Karen felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. This alien commander was not just seeking a temporary ceasefire. He was genuinely interested in finding a new path forward for both species. Then let us begin, Karen said. Let us see. If two very different species can find a way to build something better than either could achieve alone, the transformation of the galaxy's strongest species had begun. 2 years had passed since the war ended, and the galaxy had never seen anything like the changes that followed. The signing of the Terran-Corvani Mutual Defense Pact had shocked every species in known space. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Corvani had not conquered their opponents. Instead, they had learned from them. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Joint Fleet flagship Phoenix Rising, watching as human and Corvani crews worked side by side. Jake had been promoted after the war, but he still remembered the terror of those first battles when humanity faced extinction. Now, he commanded a fleet that combined the best of both species. Admiral, said Commander Zactar, entering the bridge with his usual heavy footsteps. The massive Corvani warrior now served as Jake's second-in-command, a partnership that would have been impossible to imagine during the war. Long-range sensors are detecting unknown ships approaching the Centauri system. Data on his screen. 3 large vessels of unfamiliar design were moving toward one of the joint colonies that humans and Corvani had established together. The ships showed no response to communication attempts and were heavily armed. Battle stations, Jake ordered. All ships prepare for possible combat. The joint fleet moved to intercept the unknown vessels. The human ships were smaller and faster, designed for quick strikes and evasive maneuvers, as the Corvani ships were massive and powerful, built like flying fortresses. Together, they created a force that was greater than the sum of its parts. Dr. Lisa Park worked in the science laboratory aboard the Phoenix Rising, analyzing the alien ships as they approached. She had become the chief xenobiologist for the Joint Fleet, studying new species and helping to establish first contact protocols. Her time as Zactar's prisoner had taught her more about alien psychology than years of academic study. The ship designs are completely unknown, Lisa reported to Jake over the communication system, but their weapon signatures suggest they are at least as advanced as we are. Captain Susan Turner piloted her fighter squadron alongside Corvani assault craft as they moved to intercept the alien ships. Susan now led a mixed unit of human and Corvani pilots who had learned to work together despite their very different flying styles. The humans were quick and unpredictable, while the Corvani were steady and powerful. Unknown vessels, Jake broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran-Corvani Joint Fleet. You are approaching our territory. Without authorization, please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came in the form of weapons fire. Energy beams lanced out from the alien ships, targeting both human and Corvani vessels. The attack was sudden and vicious, clearly intended to destroy rather than disable. All ships engage the enemy, Jake ordered. Protect the colony at all costs. The battle that followed showed how much both species had changed since their first encounter. Human ships used their speed and agility to confuse the attackers, while Corvani vessels provided heavy firepower and defensive screens. The tactics they used were neither purely human nor purely Corvani, but something new that combined the best of both approaches. Colonel Ryan Clark, now serving as the Joint Fleet's ground forces commander, prepared his troops for possible planetary assault. His soldiers were a mix of human Marines and Corvani warriors who had learned to fight as a single unit. The humans provided tactical flexibility and creative problem-solving, while the Corvani offered raw strength and unbreakable determination. If those ships get past the fleet, Ryan told his mixed battalion, they will try to land on the colony. Our job is to make sure they regret that decision. The space battle raged for 3 hours. The alien attackers were skilled and well-equipped, But they had not expected to face the combined forces of two species working in perfect harmony. Every time they adapted to human tactics, the Corvani hit them with overwhelming firepower. When they tried to match Corvani's strength, the humans struck from unexpected directions. Captain Susan Turner led her mixed squadron in a daring attack on the largest alien ship. Her human fighters provided cover while Corvani assault craft delivered devastating close-range attacks. The alien vessel's shields collapsed under the coordinated assault. Secondary explosions began tearing it apart from within. Target destroyed, Susan reported, moving to assist Bravo Squadron. The remaining two alien ships, seeing their flagship destroyed, attempted to retreat. But Jake had anticipated this move. Corvani heavy cruisers had moved to block their escape route, while human destroyers herded them into a trap. Alien vessels, Jake broadcast again. Surrender now, and we will guarantee your safety. Continue fighting, and you will be destroyed. Of the ship surrendered immediately, its crew apparently shocked by the effectiveness of the joint fleet. The other ship chose to fight to the end, and was destroyed when it refused to stand down. After the battle, representatives from the surviving alien crew were brought aboard the Phoenix Rising for questioning. They called themselves the Hegemony, a militant empire that had been expanding through this region of space for centuries. They had expected to find easy targets for conquest, not a unified defense by two species working together. We had heard rumors, said the Hegemony captain during his interrogation. Stories of the great Corvani Empire being defeated by primitive creatures. We thought they were lies meant to frighten us. Ambassador Karen White, now serving as the chief diplomatic officer for the joint government, smiled at the aliens' confusion. The Corvani were not defeated. They were transformed. We all were. How is this possible? The Hegemony captain asked. The strong should rule the weak. It is the natural order. Commander Zactar, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. His massive form still intimidated most aliens, but his manner was thoughtful rather than threatening. I once believed as you do, Zactar said. I thought strength meant physical power, that conquest was the only path to greatness. But the humans taught me that there are many kinds of strength, the ability to adapt, to hope, to sacrifice for others, to never give up even when defeat seems certain. These are also forms of power. Dr. Lisa Park added her own perspective. We learned that working together makes both species stronger. Human creativity combined with Corvani determination creates possibilities that neither could achieve alone. Hegemony captain looked around at the mixed crew of humans and Corvani working together on the bridge. But how do you maintain order? How do you prevent conflict between such different species? By respecting our differences while focusing on our common goals, Karen explained. We do not try to make humans more like Corvani, or Corvani more like humans. Instead, we find ways for each species to contribute their unique strengths. 6 months later, the first Hegemony colony requested permission to join the Terran-Corvani alliance. Word had spread throughout their empire about the battle at Centauri and the strange partnership between former enemies. Other species began to take notice as well. Admiral Jake Morrison. It's often reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate battle in Earth's orbit. The scared human captain who had sent that defiant message to the Corvani fleet was now the leader of the most powerful force in this region of space. He had learned that true strength came not from conquest, but from cooperation. Commander Zactar had transformed as well. The proud warrior who had once believed only in the power of force now understood that the greatest victories were those that created allies rather than subjects. His own people on Corvus Prime had embraced many human concepts, while humans had learned much from Corvani, engineering and discipline. The strongest Deathworld species in the galaxy had encountered humanity and discovered that strength came in forms they had never imagined. In learning to appreciate human resilience, creativity, and determination, the Corvani had become something greater than they had ever been as conquerors. The universe, it turned out, was vast enough for different kinds of strength to coexist and thrive together. And in their partnership, both species had found a path to a future neither could have imagined alone.